Hi, everyone. This time we're going to talk a little bit about what a spiritual awakening is. And when I first launched the site, I did an hour-long podcast that tried to capture the story of my personal spiritual awakening. And it tries to just give flavor to, in my case, it being a very unexpected experience. As I mentioned, kind of use the word unsought after. But the nature of spiritual awakening is something that is consistent in that it tends to be a realization. It can be a moment, it can be experience, it can be a teaching in which you realize that you are bigger and more than the script and the role that you thought that you were. And for many people, that means beyond the ego, and not the ego in a negative way, but just the ego and the understanding that to function within this lifetime and this experience, you have all these identifiers and names and rules and roles. And so as you come from birth and you go through this experience, you become who you are by the stories in which you progress through your life. And those stories, some of them we hold for our lifetime, and they become quite defining of who and what we are, and also what we think we are not or cannot be. And other stories, they just kind of float by. We receive them and we let them go. But many of the stories that we collect, that we do hold, they become what we would refer to as our identity. And in that sense, it is a series and collections of markers that accumulate over time. And that accumulation is what we would say is the story of who and what we are. And we often see that in a progressive state, meaning that we have the concept of achievement, and we believe that there's a correlation between time and the experiences we go through to become who we are, and that is always a betterment, that the more things that we do and that we learn and that we hold, that accumulation is something that is, in many people's perspective, worth more value. And so we want to continue to collect things and hold them. And over this lifetime or these lifetimes, that accumulation of story matter, if you will, can become quite onerous and quite heavy, especially when many of the stories we didn't necessarily orient ourselves, or we didn't, in our experience, direct them. Many of the identifiers that we feel that we've received are from situations and people and experiences that we see as beyond our control. The thing that happened in the 5th grade, and the thing that happened with that broken arm, or that health disaster, or, the glory of the achievement, whatever it was in that moment. Some of those things we would think that we are directing because we sought out to achieve them, as in that last example. But there's many other things that we would say we were not in control of, that they just happen. That's the nature of that life and the seemingly randomness of the things that can happen. Many of them based in the perception of danger or fears, that we have, things that can hurt us, things that go wrong. And so we feel like there's this balancing game of things that can go wrong, dangers, and things that we can do well, that we can apply ourselves to achieve, to balance out some kind of stasis in this experience called life that's going to be kinder and more gentle and more rewarding to us than not. And it's that kind of navigating that balance of those variables that we feel creates our schedule, creates our life. We want to fill our schedule with the things that we believe that we can control, that will orient to a more positive outcome or a more free state of being. And then we have these moments after all of that education and, in many cases, indoctrination of all the things that we've been told. If you do this, you're good. If you don't do that, you're bad. If you do this, you'll be safe. If you don't do that, well, who can really know? All those traditions of this modern society tell us the stories that navigate the entirety of our life. And so however you receive that, based on your own tradition, based on your age and the geography and ethnicity and the time in which you're born, all of those are going to have different flavors. But the overriding story that we live with is that we have an identity and that we are in control of that identity and what is happening to us. And our preoccupation with controlling the control, of owning the control, is what fills most people's life. To swim away from the danger and to grasp with great tightness onto all elements in which we can control, whether that be a relationship, whether that's finances, whether that's our job, whatever perception of control, whatever flavor in that moment. And so the experience of awakening, I would describe it not only from my own experience, but having done extensive reading and meeting other people who've had varieties of these experiences. There's a moment where you can see that structure in which you were previously identifying, and you have a moment of realization or insight that you are in fact much greater than this single human being and this set of traditions and stories through which you believed you were navigating to get acknowledgement or to be rewarded, or most likely to avoid fear and to avoid pain. And when we talk about these topics, whether we use the word enlightenment or awakening, the goal here is to be helpful. And that's always the filter in which I try to create any piece of content of this nature. It has to be the question of what is helpful to other people, and am I doing it in the spirit of helpfulness? And when we talk about awakening, I think the most helpful thing for people to realize is it's not some necessarily esoteric or mystical, unreachable experience or state. An awakening, although mystical by nature as a sacred thing, is very attainable as a form of realization. And we're seeing in this time that many, many, many more people of a vast array of backgrounds, from all the different factors I mentioned a minute ago in terms of geography and time and wealth and ethnicity, the idea of experiencing awakening is becoming much more pervasive. And of course, there are those who seek these states and for many years go out and practice a tradition, a lineage, through teachers and readings and rituals to reach a state other than standard consciousness, what we would call like the default mode network, the way in which our mind and our body and our beliefs operate on a day-to-day basis. And many of them are spontaneously having these experiences of awakening. Of course, as I mentioned, there's people who perceive this or a variation of these experiences the entirety of this lifetime. But we're finding that more and more people are sharing commonality in these types of experiences. And one of the greatest joys that I have in choosing to speak about this is that you find other people who have had a whole variety of experiences that they intentionally chose not to acknowledge or didn't speak to anyone about, because they didn't have the social network of a community of people who had similar spiritual experiences, or they didn't have the vocabulary to know how to articulate in a healthy way what had happened or what is happening as part of their life experience. And so, in even publishing my site with Bala.love, about a month ago, I continue to find, just like I did with Just Love Forest, that there's all these people from different facets of my life, some of them being related to previous business ventures, and some of them related to just social groups and communities where spiritual topics and things of spiritual nature just aren't openly discussed. And the recurring theme that I have on a personal basis is that it's a bit like coming out. And it's sort of a gift that I got to do that already once at the age of 18, related to my sexuality, not knowing that these skills and tools and strengths would come back a second time later in my life to be able to speak truthfully about this experience that is shared and occurring often amongst groups of people. And the common line that's shared in this particular instance is that topics of a spiritual nature just aren't generally discussed in a lot of social and business forums. And although you might perceive the spiritual nature of life or other people or circumstances to speak of that directly in an honest, open nature where you feel safe, is a very rare thing now, although I feel like it is becoming more common as all these practices and all these traditions of spiritual nature becoming more pervasive, and they're starting to come within the business setting and within other social settings like we haven't seen before. Things like all forms of well-being, meditation, yoga, all the advances in healthcare and nutrition, metaphysics, all of these scientific principles and spiritual principles perfectly aligning and exactly representing the same understanding and configuration of how the universe works and what this experience is about beyond consuming and beyond immediate desires. So, getting back to the nature of awakening, I would say that it is any experience or moment in which you're allowed to see beyond the confines and the structure of your egoic nature. Again, the ego in this case would be defined as the series of experiences and beliefs in names and labels and identifiers that when you wake up beyond a dream state every morning, you are rebooted into that knowledge of who and what you are and where you are. Before that moment of literally awakening into the day, you could be anyone and anything, anywhere, if you've ever had a dream, what we call a dream. And then you're rebooted, you are remembering and reminded of the labels and of the continuity of experiences that you've been taught in this lifetime that identifies you. And you carry those, for better or for worse, all of them, all those attributes. And then whether it's a catastrophic accident, which is a very common occurrence, or again, if you've been on a vision quest and fasting in the wilderness for 4 or 5 days, or it's just a unique moment of insight. It could be like a lightning bolt, or it could be after many years of practice, where you are able to observe all of that structure and all of those labels and markers as a system of belief that is representing who you are, and you are not that. You are not only that. You are that, and you are so much more. And the process of awakening is generally not a didactic learning experience. There are forms of yoga that are based on knowledge and learning in books. But generally, it's experiential, meaning that it's not something that you could sit here. I can't sit here and use this experience of words and sound and pixels on the screen to convey a direct experience. Direct experience is just that. It is a direct experience that you have as your own unique moment of realization and insight. And when I say that, it's not meant to make it unachievable or esoteric, as I mentioned. It means that everyone can access these moments of insight, and the insights are universal. When people have spiritual awakenings, generally you don't find that out of 100 people that had a spiritual awakening, there's 100 forms and variations of the underlying beliefs and the underlying direct experience that came from those newfound beliefs. You find that there is, generally speaking, great similarity in going from a very constrained understanding through words and labels as to what your identity is into a much greater, expansive, universal identity that is beyond one lifetime and beyond the confines of a human body and a name and an address and a social security number and a salary. And you might receive that as a form of positive thinking. Maybe it's like coping to believe or feel that you're more than your little self might feel belittled as. Like it's the power of positive thinking. Know that you're greater than you think that you are. And again, I would share that it's not a cognitive process. It's not an idea. It's a moment of experiential insight where there is an opening in what is felt and thought and perceived, not just in the way that we think and perceive things now, but even an expansion of our senses. We believe that we understand happiness and sadness within a realm of sensitivity that we have been experiencing in this body in this lifetime. And then when you realize that the bounds of that sensitivity in a higher and lower range are obliterated by experiences that show you that the scale is far more infinite than you could have ever imagined, then all of those markers become just sort of mere shadows of what you thought that you knew and what you thought that you could experience as a human, within a human body and all the senses of a human body. I would say that the experience can be unique in the way that it happens and how that it happens. And when we start to talk about awakening, there can be moments of insight that are non-abiding. So you might have an insight in an experiential way as a direct experience that this life and consciousness that you're experiencing is not just about a singular lifetime in a human body. And that moment of insight could open up a completely abiding change in your experience day to day for the rest of this lifetime. Or it could be an interesting opening for 6 months, and then it closes, the aperture closes a bit, and that's what we call non-abiding. And so it's also not, it's not that someone is more advanced for sure. If anything, it's a realization that we are all exactly the same. So there's no, there's no awake and asleep in a judgmental way. And I find those terms to not generally be helpful. When you say that someone's awake, the counter to that is, oh, well, then the other person might be asleep. And those markers to me seem less helpful than just always understanding that consciousness is always developing and it's always awakening all the time. And then you just have these critical junctures of insight that sometimes can be exponential in terms of how they're experienced. And it's not that any one person and a human body as a human being is accelerated or decelerated in terms of their advancement. Consciousness is a singular experience It's a singular experience that, as a fragmentation of that one experience, we have a human body and a name in this one lifetime. And so the expansion of human consciousness as awakening is a collective experience. It's not my experience. It's not my awakening. It is our shared consciousness, and consciousness realizing itself as something that is more connected and more singular in nature instead of divided and multifaceted. It comes back to, if you will, the singularity, not in the sense of the robots and the humans, but the singularity of all life and intelligence and consciousness. So these moments may be abiding or non-abiding, and although we might perceive them as being had by individuals, it's actually the phenomena of consciousness is realizing itself through individuals, which is just to say that there is no better or worse. There's no possible competition in the concept of a spiritual awakening, because part of that awakening is the universal understanding of shared consciousness and all life as one field of energy. And once you experience that directly beyond your story of yourself, the concept of it being competitive or exclusionary in any way it's hilarious. It is comedic in that sense. So as you're considering where you're at in your own journey in this experience of a human body in this lifetime, one of the biggest blockers and barriers to deeply feeling and experiencing a connection in the heart, which is a whole nother talk we'll do, and deepening into your natural state of being, awakening to the truth of what you always have been and what you always are. As Ram Dass would say, it's becoming no one. It's not achieving. And the achievement of awakening, the studying of awakening as a topic, most often is a barrier to realizing that truth. Because every time that you're achieving something outside of yourself, you're going further away from the nature of the truth, which is that everything from the moment of your birth and an inconceivable amount of time before your birth was all here. It's all held within your heart. And all of that sounds like platitude and Hallmark cards until, again, you have one of these moments of realization, insight. So it's not about being better. It's not certainly about gaining or achieving. It's actually a softening and it's a surrendering, but it's not surrendering to something other than yourself. It's actually surrendering to your true nature as yourself. And most of the things that we mentioned, all the stories that we pick up, the accolades, the possessions, whether they're physical, mental, emotional, psychological, much of this is relinquishing the control, the need and the desire to hang on to these aspects of who and what we thought that we were. And to do that, to not attempt to achieve it, and just allow yourself to observe these elements of your life experience, to be able to soften enough and quiet enough that the unfolding of your personal truth will happen. That's really what a sadhana program is about. So this certainly is not, it's the antithesis of, I had this amazing experience and you can be like me, come do this thing with me. It couldn't be further from that. It's actually, you are this, and you will know within yourself, by yourself ultimately, through allowing a set of conditions in your life, a spaciousness and a time and a prioritization for these things to unfold and occur naturally. And that's really what sadhana is about. It is a path to consistent respect for yourself and noticing the way that the universe is actually working beyond the structure and beyond the nonsense that we've created primarily in the last couple hundred years. Most civilization and most peoples revolved around nature and the seasons. And they did that because their life was not dependent upon it. Their life was it. They were it. They knew that they were part of that universal nature. And much of what we've constructed now in fear and aversion of pain are things that cover up our truest nature. And so they create other kinds of pain that we didn't even know that we could have. So now we're not cold as much, and maybe we're not hungry as much. But I don't even need to repeat the statistics around the lack of well-being that's being experienced by people psychologically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And so, sadhana and spiritual awakening, I would say this moment of spiritual awakening is becoming more and more pervasive. And we'll talk about why that is in some other talks. And we'll talk about what it means in terms of benefiting the rebalancing of the world. But this experience is becoming more pervasive, and it's becoming more shared and talked about. And it's a universal experience, although the entry points are unique and different in many ways. But the universal truths are the same, which we'll talk about some more as well in some other talks. So awakening is getting back to the essence of your truth, of everything that you've always known yourself to be and you've had in your heart before the moment of birth and at the moment of birth. And it's a beautiful process in which we go through this life experience and we attain and we gather and we control all these elements so that we can have this moment or this experience or this relationship that will be the defining moment in which we start to let go of all of these things. And once we make that decision, we free ourselves. We free ourselves of all of the false responsibilities and the weights and the things that we're carrying. Then we start to recalibrate. And that recalibration is that moment and that experience of awakening to get balanced again. It's a rebalancing of our mind and our heart. When you get down to it, it's really a rebalancing of the power and the strength through which we're navigating this experience using our mind versus using the truth of our heart. And again, that can sound like a Hallmark card until you actually have some of these experiences. And then, some of the people that I spent time with, after they have one of these experiences, they apologize. They say, "Oh man, I'm so sorry. Thank you for being so patient." Because I couldn't really fully conceive what it was that you were trying to share. And of course I just laugh, because it's beautiful and that's all perfect. And I would never be frustrated in the least as people go through these experiences, not because they're having my insight or even sharing my insight, but because they're having the same universal insight that I and millions and millions and millions of other people have had and are having about the nature of what this experience is truly and really all about. So the message here is sadhana. The way that I work with people is not formulaic. It's not a program. I sit down with you and I listen to you and I try to understand the stories and traditions and rituals in which you have created this identity that you're holding. And I try to understand the experiences through which you've seen greater truth beyond just your name and social security number and address and salary of who and what you truly are. Even if it's just an intuitive knowing, I feel into that and I work with that. And the sadhana, then based on your background and based on your stories and based on your own intuitive nature of a freedom and a truth, that is what I uniquely create a 40-day program around. And it also takes into consideration the nature of what is doable for you in your life. It's not a boot camp. and it's not meant to be torturous. It is a journey of self-discovery. You know, when you're tired of endlessly doing the same loops of self-improvement, and then eventually you get to the point where you want to discover your true self and stop trying to improve the story of yourself. And so the 40 days as a container, and it can involve nature and forest therapy, it can involve art and music, it involves meditation and breath work. Those tend to be two common elements that are necessary. And it also brings like sacred ritual into your life, not my sacred rituals. It listens to your stories and your legacy to help rekindle and remember that this life experience is not about consumption, and it's not about greed or achievement or lust. It's actually far more than that. And so bringing that sacred reciprocity back into your life is a big part of sadhana, and it's completely unique to every person based on all those factors we talked about before. So it's a relationship that you have with me, not to become like me, but for me to use elements that I've been exposed to through my various certifications and a series of direct experiences, using a number of tools to offer you the container of consistency over 40 days to get into your own truth from the universe of what's here, like what's in your heart. So in that case, you know, it's an art between the two of us. It's co-created, and we spend a couple of weeks listening and designing the program. And then across the 40 days, I'm really just a friend. I'm there with you across your journey. I'm supporting you. We're navigating this experience together across the 40 days. We have a series of conversations and meetings. We try to be as truthful and open through our hearts and speaking to each other from that place of authenticity. And we navigated the journey together, and we wait. We wait for the universe, and we wait for the truth of our heart to become closer to the surface of our consciousness. And we don't grasp, and we're not looking for a certificate of achievement to say that we had some form of awakening. It's not about that. It's about surrendering to the perfection of an experience that oftentimes we neglect to fully see and to fully know. And all the beauty and all the mystery and all the pain and all the suffering is all part of it. So getting to be with that. So that's a little bit about the experience of awakening. And just lastly, I would say that every being is sharing the same consciousness. This experience of consciousness it's a universal miracle. You still can't find it in the brain. That's a whole nother talk. You know, somebody wants to find your consciousness, they're not going to find it medically or scientifically in the body anywhere. They've tried extensively. So this experience of you listening to me, thinking that you're you listening to me, this is consciousness. This singular experience is realizing itself at this time in ways that we're remembering that we knew previously. And now we have a whole host of technologies and experiences that help connect us globally and universally that are also blessings when used and thought of in the right way. So yeah, awakening is it's not an achievement. It's not something that may happen in any particular lifetime. And if you're still sort of stuck on the concept of this being a singular lifetime, then that can also be something fun to explore. Again, as a direct experience and not based on any religious teachings per se. But in any given lifetime, consciousness is expanding and realizing itself in a deeper, more meaningful way, connecting back to truth. And that's really what we can do with each other in a shared container of sadhana. And it's a friendly experience, and it's one of self-discovery, exploration, creativity. So yeah, that's a little bit deeper, and I'll go into some particulars of what that might look like for people. But when you work with me, the key thing again, it's a relationship between you and I, a self-discovery. It's custom for you and your journey in this particular lifetime. And we get to have a lot of fun. A lot of fun rediscovering, uncovering the mystery. So yeah, that's a little bit about awakening today. If you feel it in your heart at all to discover more about what you truly are through your own direct experiences that you'll realize on your own, then you can just set up a call with me. We can do a 20-minute call and I can, just start to talk to you about where you're at. And you may not be ready for a sadhana. We may just need to do a few sessions discussing things. So there's many paths to us being helpful to each other. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this and share this experience with me. I continue to love the journey of this unfolding and sharing and getting to meet and re-meet many people in different chapters of their lives as they continue to go through all these experiences. But I'll continue to do some of these updates and share my journey and share the things that I'm learning as well as part of this unfolding. So much to share about Just Love Forest and all the things that have affected my life since that moment 5 years ago. And so I'll continue to share those for those who choose to listen. Thank you for the time, and I look forward to talking with some of you.